What if the stories we tell aren't just fantasies, but echoes of something deeper, something real? For thousands of years, across every corner of the world, humanity has been captivated by tales of gods who walked among mortals, heroes who defied impossible odds, and creatures that defied the laws of nature. These aren't just bedtime stories or simple legends. They're the threads that weave together the fabric of cultures, shaping how ancient civilizations understood the world, and perhaps, hidden within them, are truths we've only begun to uncover. Today, we're embarking on a journey through 35 of the most extraordinary tales of mythical powers ever told, stories that have echoed through time, whispered in temples, carved into stone, and passed down through generations. Think about the last time you felt that shiver down your spine when hearing a myth, the story of a hero lifting a sword only they could wield, or a goddess who could command the tides with a single word. There's a reason these stories stick with us. They speak to something primal in our collective imagination, the longing for power beyond human limits, the awe of forces greater than ourselves, and the tantalizing question, what if? What if these abilities weren't just metaphors? What if, buried beneath layers of time and retelling, there's a kernel of reality waiting to be rediscovered? From the thunderbolts of Zeus to the shape-shifting tricksters of indigenous folklore, these myths aren't just relics of the past. They're mirrors reflecting humanity's deepest fears, boldest dreams, and most unshakable mysteries. So let's step into the shadows where history and legend blur. Picture standing at the edge of an ancient temple where the air hums with the energy of stories untold. Over the next 35 tales, we'll encounter gods who built empires on their will alone, mortals who stole power from the divine, and creatures whose very existence defies explanation. Some of these stories will feel familiar, like old friends revisited. Others will surprise you, pulling back the curtain on legends you've never heard, whispers from forgotten cultures waiting to be heard again. This isn't just a list, it's an expedition into the unknown, a chance to uncover the secrets hidden in plain sight, wrapped in the guise of myth, ready to begin. Then let's dive into the first tale where the line between legend and reality might be thinner than you think. Every civilization in its earliest days gazed up at the same vast sky and asked the same unshakable question, where did all of this come from? And so, the very first tales ever told were attempts to answer that mystery, spinning stories of gods who carved the world from nothingness, or primal forces clashing in the dark before time began. Take the Norse myth of Ymir, the first giant whose body became the earth itself. His flesh the soil, his bones the mountains, his blood the rivers. It's a story of transformation, of violence giving way to order, mirrored in countless other traditions. The ancient Egyptians believed the world began with a single mound rising from endless waters, while the Aboriginal Dreamtime speaks of ancestral spirits shaping the land as they moved across it, singing rivers and mountains into existence. What's fascinating isn't just the differences, but the echoes, themes that repeat across continents as if woven into humanity's collective imagination. Almost every creation myth starts with chaos, a formless void, a cosmic egg, or a realm of endless night. Then comes the catalyst, a god's breath, a thunderbolt, a divine word splitting that emptiness into sky and earth, light and dark. The Greek poet Hesiod described it as Gaia rising from the yawning chasm of chaos, while the Maori of New Zealand tell of Rangi and Papa, the Sky Father and Earth Mother, locked in an embrace so tight their children had to pry them apart to let creation flourish. Even the scientific Big Bang theory, in a way, mirrors these ancient intuitions, an explosion of potential from a single, unfathomable point. But why do these stories resonate so deeply? Perhaps because they're more than just explanations. They're declarations of belonging. When the Babylonians wrote of Marduk slaying the dragon Tiamat to fashion the heavens from her body, or the Yoruba people spoke of the Orisha Obatala molding the first humans from clay, they weren't just describing origins. They were anchoring themselves in the cosmos, saying, "This is where we fit." These myths gave meaning to storms and seasons, to life and death, framing existence itself as a story, one where humans, however small, played a part. And that's the real magic of creation myths. They don't just tell us how the world began, they tell us who we are. Whether it's the Hindu belief in a universe cycling endlessly through creation and destruction, or the Judeo-Christian story of a single divine hand sculpting Adam from dust, these narratives shape cultures, laws, even entire worldviews. So the next time you look at a mountain or a river, remember somewhere, thousands of years ago, someone stood in awe of that same sight and wove a story to explain it. A story that, in its own way, still whispers to us today. If creation myths show us how the world began, the tales of gods at war reveal how humanity explained the chaos that followed. Nowhere is this more vivid than in the thunderous clashes of the Greek pantheon, where divine feuds weren't just personal squabbles, they were cosmic earthquakes reshaping mortal lives. At the heart of it all stood Zeus, the Sky Father, whose lightning bolts could split mountains, but whose reign was forever challenged by those closest to him. Hera, his queen, whose vengeance could outlast centuries, and Poseidon, whose trident stirred oceans into fury. These weren't just deities with extraordinary powers, they were forces of nature personified, their rivalries etching lessons into the very landscape of ancient Greece. Take the story of Zeus and Hera's tumultuous marriage, a union that crackled with as much tension as Zeus's own storms. Hera, goddess of marriage, was ironically cursed with a husband whose wanderings became legend. But her wrath wasn't petty jealousy, it was divine retribution. When Zeus seduced the nymph Io, Hera didn't just punish her husband's lover. She transformed the girl into a heifer, chased her across continents with a stinging gadfly, and turned her suffering into a cautionary tale. Even the innocent pay when gods collide. And yet, Hera's power wasn't just cruelty. She was the shield of wives, the enforcer of oaths, and her conflicts with Zeus mirrored the very human struggles of loyalty and betrayal. Then there was Poseidon, the earth shaker, whose grudges could flood cities. When the Olympians divided the world, Zeus took the sky, Hades the underworld, and Poseidon the seas, but the god of the oceans coveted more. His feud with Athena over Athens wasn't just a divine popularity contest, it was a clash of ideologies. Poseidon struck the Acropolis with his trident, unleashing a saltwater spring to claim the city. Athena answered with an olive tree, a symbol of peace and prosperity. The gods' powers weren't just displays of strength, they were arguments about what humanity needed most. And in the end, the Athenians chose wisdom over force, but Poseidon's rage sent floods for generations, a reminder that the gods' battles always rained down on mortals. These myths did more than entertain, they explained the unexplainable. When earthquakes shattered Greek cities, it wasn't geology, it was Poseidon's trident striking in anger. When storms erupted without warning, Zeus was flexing his power. Even Hera's vendettas reflected the chaos of royal courts and the fragility of social order. Every clash served a purpose, to teach that power, even divine power, was never absolute. Zeus might rule Olympus, but his authority was constantly tested. Hera's schemes showed that influence could be as deadly as lightning, and Poseidon's tempers proved that no kingdom, divine or mortal, could escape the ripple effects of ambition. What's remarkable is how these stories humanized the gods while keeping them utterly alien. They loved, fought, and schemed like people, but their powers made their conflicts catastrophic. A lover's quarrel between Zeus and Hera could birth constellations or level civilizations. Poseidon's jealousy didn't just sour a family dinner, it sank ships. And in that tension, the Greeks found meaning. If even the gods couldn't escape strife, how could mortals expect to? Yet there was hope too. For every divine feud, there were moments of reconciliation, alliances forged in crisis, and the sense that even Olympus had rules. The gods' battles weren't just chaos, they were part of a balance, one that shaped the myths, the land, and the people who told them. The Nile wasn't just a river to the ancient Egyptians, it was the pulse of creation itself, a shimmering ribbon of life winding through the desert, and the gods who ruled over it wielded powers as vast and cyclical as its floods. At the helm stood Ra, the sun god, whose golden bark sailed across the sky each day, battling the serpent Apophis in the underworld each night to ensure dawn would come again. This wasn't just poetry, it was cosmology in action. Every sunrise was Ra's victory, every sunset his perilous descent into Juwat, the realm of shadows. His journey mirrored the Nile's own rhythm, predictable yet fragile, a balance between order and chaos that kept the world alive, but Ra didn't rule alone. Beneath his radiance moved Osiris, the god of resurrection, whose story was written in the very soil of Egypt. Betrayed by his brother Set, dismembered, and scattered along the Nile, Osiris became the first mummy reassembled by Isis, his queen, whose magic stitched death into rebirth. When the Nile receded each year, leaving fertile black silt in its wake, farmers saw Osiris's body renewing the land. When the floods returned, they were his tears of joy. His power wasn't just about coming back to life, it was about transformation, the promise that decay could always give way to abundance. And then there was Isis, the sorceress whose whispers could bend fate. She didn't just resurrect Osiris, she tricked Ra himself into revealing his secret name, the source of his power. With that knowledge, she became the weaver of destinies, a protector whose spells guarded pharaohs and peasants alike. Her magic wasn't flashy like lightning or earthquakes, it was subtle, relentless, like the Nile's current shaping stone over centuries. The ankh she held wasn't just a symbol of life, it was a key, one that unlocked the invisible threads binding the cosmos. Together, these gods formed a trinity of cosmic order, Ra with his unending cycle of light, Osiris with his promise of renewal, and Isis with her mastery of the unseen. Their stories weren't just myths, they were blueprints for survival in a land where the desert always loomed. When priests chanted hymns to Ra at dawn, or mourners invoked Osiris at a burial, or mothers tucked Isis's amulets into their children's clothes, they weren't just praying, they were participating in the same eternal rhythms that kept the Nile flowing and the stars in place. What's striking is how these divine roles mirrored the natural world. Ra's journey mirrored the sun's path, yes, but also the pharaoh's duty to maintain the delicate balance of truth and justice. Osiris's resurrection echoed the agricultural cycle, while Isis's magic reflected the quiet, everyday resilience of women grinding grain or nursing the sick. The gods weren't distant rulers, they were partners in the labor of existence. Even their flaws felt familiar. Ra grew old and weary, needing Isis's cunning to sustain him. Osiris, once a proud king, became lord of the dead, his power born from vulnerability. And Isis, for all her wisdom, was also a widow, a mother fighting for her son Horus's birthright. That's the secret heartbeat of these myths. They didn't just explain the world, they made it sacred. A farmer sowing seeds was Osiris at work. A midwife easing childbirth channeled Isis's grace. And every time the sun burned through the morning haze, it was Ra renewing his vow that so long as the gods kept their cosmic duties, the Nile would rise, the harvests would come, and life mortal and divine would endure. There's a chilling inevitability in Norse mythology, a prophecy so absolute that even the gods tremble at its name, Ragnarök, the twilight of the gods. Unlike other mythologies where fate can bend or bargains can be struck, this is a doom written in runes before time began. At its heart stand three figures whose actions weave the tapestry of destiny. Odin, the one-eyed wanderer who trades his eye for wisdom. Thor, the thunderer whose strength shakes the 9 realms. And Loki, the shape-shifting trickster whose lies unravel the world. Together, they're not just players in this cosmic drama, they're the architects of its end. Odin's hunger for knowledge is both his power and his curse. He hangs himself from Yggdrasil, the world tree, for 9 nights, pierced by his own spear, just to glimpse the secrets of the runes. He drinks from the well of Mimir, sacrificing an eye to see the future. Yet for all his wisdom, he can't escape what he sees. The wolf Fenrir breaking his chains, the serpent Jormungand unleashing poison across the land, and his own death at the jaws of the monstrous wolf. Even the All-Father, ruler of Asgard, is bound by the prophecy. His ravens, thought and memory, fly across the realms each day, bringing him news but no solace. Every battle he fights, every spell he casts, is a desperate attempt to delay what he knows is coming. Then there's Thor, the Stormbringer, whose hammer Mjolnir can level mountains. His strength is unmatched. He wrestles giants, fishes for the world serpent, and stands as Asgard's mightiest shield. But in the end, even his power has limits. During Ragnarök, he slays Jormungand, only to stagger 9 steps and fall dead from the serpent's venom. His brute force, though legendary, can't rewrite fate. The irony is brutal. The god who spends his life protecting the realms ultimately dies protecting them. His final act both heroic and futile. And then there's Loki, the wild card, the chaos in the equation. Bound in chains with his son's entrails after orchestrating the death of Odin's beloved son Balder, his rage festers like a wound. When he breaks free at Ragnarök, he doesn't fight for glory or survival. He leads the armies of the dead against the gods out of pure, spiteful joy. His trickery, once a source of irritation in Asgard's halls, becomes the spark that ignites the end. Unlike Odin's foreknowledge or Thor's might, Loki's power lies in his refusal to play by any rules, even the rules of fate. The brilliance of Ragnarök isn't just its spectacle, the sky splitting, the earth sinking into the sea, but its circularity. The world ends in fire and ice, yes, but from the ashes a new earth emerges. 2 humans sheltered in Yggdrasil's roots repopulate the world. The sun, swallowed by the wolf skull, is reborn in her daughter. Even the gods return, with Odin's sons inheriting his mantle. It's a cycle as old as time itself, destruction paving the way for renewal. What makes this myth so haunting isn't the inevitability of doom, but how the gods meet it. Odin gathers fallen warriors in Valhalla, not to prevent Ragnarök, but to face it with honor. Thor fights knowing he'll die because that's what protectors do. And Loki, he embraces the chaos he's always embodied. In the end, Norse mythology doesn't offer salvation, it offers defiance. The gods don't win, but they don't surrender either. And perhaps that's the lesson etched into these icy tales, that how you meet your fate matters as much as the fate itself. Long before the Celts carved their kingdoms across Ireland, the land whispered with a different kind of power, one that hummed beneath the hills, shimmered in the mist of sacred groves, and walked among mortals in the form of the Tuatha De Danann, the people of the goddess Danu. These were not mere gods of distant mountaintops, but beings woven into the very soil and stone of Ireland, wielding enchantments so potent they blurred the line between history and legend. Their arrival was anything but ordinary. Ancient texts describe them descending from the skies in a cloud of smoke, bringing with them 4 treasures that would become the stuff of prophecy: the sword of Nuada that none could escape, the spear of Lugh that guaranteed victory, the cauldron of the Dagda that no company ever left unfed, and the stone of destiny that roared when touched by the true king. These weren't just magical objects, they were extensions of the Tuatha De Danann's will, tools that shaped the fate of Ireland itself. Their greatest battle wasn't fought for gold or glory, but for the right to call Ireland home. The first battle of Mag Tuaid saw them clash with the Firbolg, the previous rulers of the land, in a conflict so fierce it split rivers and shattered spears. Nuada, their king, lost his arm in the fighting, a wound that cost him his throne, for the Tuatha De Danann demanded perfection in their leaders. Yet even in this, their magic revealed its depth. The physician god Dian Sate crafted him a silver hand so lifelike it moved with his will, while the smith Goibniu forged weapons that never missed their mark. But the true marvel came from their mastery of the otherworld, a realm coexisting with our own where time flowed differently and the impossible became mundane. To enter it was to step into a twilight of eternal feasts, shape-shifting animals, and music that could lull warriors into a sleep lasting centuries. Luglamfodder, the many-skilled, embodied this duality best. A master of every art from poetry to warfare, he wasn't just a god, he was a bridge between worlds. When the Tuatha De Danann faced their greatest threat, the monstrous Fomorians, it was Lug who rallied them, not with brute strength but with cunning. He outplayed Balor of the Evil Eye, a giant whose gaze could annihilate armies, by using a slingstone to strike his own lethal eye back into his skull. This victory, the second battle of Mag Tuatha, wasn't just a triumph of magic over might. It was a testament to the Tuatha De Danann's understanding that power took many forms. The Dagda, their jovial yet formidable father figure, proved this when he tricked the Fomorian king into eating a porridge so vast it left him helpless, while the Morrigan, the Phantom Queen, whispered prophecies that twisted the battle's tide like a river diverted by unseen hands. And then, as swiftly as they arrived, they receded, not vanishing, but retreating into the hills and mounds that dot Ireland's landscape, becoming the Aos-Shi, the fairy folk of later folklore. Their palaces became the Shia, those mysterious green mounds where time dances to its own tune. Even in defeat by the mortal Milesians, they struck a bargain, the surface world for humankind, the underground and the otherworld for them. But their presence never truly faded. To this day, farmers leave offerings at hawthorn trees believed to be their portals, and storytellers warn of fiddlers lured into their revels only to emerge decades later, untouched by age. The Tuatha De Danann didn't just leave behind myths, they left a living legacy, a whisper that the border between our world and theirs is thinner than a morning mist, and just as easily pierced by those who know where to look. In the swirling currents of Hindu cosmology, where time stretches across endless cycles and universes breathe in and out like living things, one thread remains constant: the promise that whenever darkness threatens to drown the world, divinity itself will step into mortal form to set the scales right again. This is the heart of Vishnu's avatars, his descent into the realm of suffering to wield power not from afar but shoulder to shoulder with humanity. Among his 10 incarnations, 2 shine with particular brilliance: Rama, the arrow-straight prince of Dharma, and Krishna, the flute-playing strategist of destiny. Their stories aren't just mythic adventures, they're masterclasses in how divine power intersects with human frailty, and what it truly means to restore balance when chaos seems unstoppable. Rama's tale, immortalized in the Ramayana, begins with what seems like a simple quest rescuing his abducted wife, Sita, from the demon king Ravana. But beneath the surface, this is a story about the unbearable weight of duty. When Rama is exiled to the forest for 14 years due to a palace intrigue, he doesn't rage or rebel. He goes not because he's weak, but because his word is unbreakable. His power isn't just in his celestial bow, which can pierce mountains, but in his unwavering adherence to righteousness even when it costs him everything. Ravana, by contrast, is a scholar king who's mastered every scripture, yet his ego turns that knowledge into a weapon. His 10 heads symbolize not wisdom, but arrogance multiplied, a corruption so deep it takes Rama's divine arrows, tipped with the names of Vishnu himself, to cleanse it. What makes Rama's victory profound isn't the battle's spectacle, but its aftermath, his reluctant acceptance of kingship, his public testing of Sita's purity, a moment that still sparks debate, and his ultimate return to the heavens, leaving behind a blueprint for righteous rule. Then there's Krishna, whose life reads like a symphony of contradictions. He's a cowherd who dances on serpent kings, a lover who whispers cosmic truths to a single soul, and a charioteer who delivers the Bhagavad Gita mid-battlefield. Unlike Rama's unwavering light, Krishna thrives in shadows and subtleties. When the warrior Arjuna crumples with doubt on the eve of war, Krishna doesn't command, he reveals. His famous discourse on dharma, duty, and detachment isn't a decree from on high. It's a conversation, a peeling back of reality's layers to show Arjuna his own place in the universe's fabric. And then there are his leelas, those playful, even scandalous acts stealing butter, teasing milkmaids that hide deeper truths. His dance atop Kaliya the serpent isn't just a victory, it's a metaphor for taming the coiled, venomous ego within. Even his role in the Mahabharata war is paradoxical. He vows not to lift weapons, yet his strategies ensure the corrupt Kauravas fall, proving that wisdom can be deadlier than swords. What ties these avatars together is their refusal to act as detached gods. Rama weeps for Sita, Krishna mourns his kinsmen's deaths. They don't erase suffering, they share it, showing that balance isn't about eliminating darkness but meeting it with the right kind of light. Rama's path is one of structure, laws, vows, boundaries. Krishna's is fluid adaptation, nuance, the spaces between rules. Together, they map the spectrum of Vishnu's promise. That divinity isn't a distant judge, but a presence that walks beside us, whether as a prince who carries his own exile like a crown or a cowherd whose laughter holds the secrets of the cosmos. The brilliance of these avatars lies in their unfinished lessons. Rama's reign, though glorious, ends with whispered doubts about justice. Krishna's playfulness leaves us wondering where divinity ends and humanity begins. Even their weapons are metaphors in disguise. Rama's arrows forged from discipline, Krishna's flute a hollow reed through which eternity breathes. To hear their stories isn't just to witness miracles, it's to grapple with the same questions they did. When must we stand firm and when must we bend? How does love survive in a world of duty? And perhaps most crucially, what does it mean to wield power without being corrupted by it? Vishnu's answer, echoed across both lives, is deceptively simple. True power serves not the self, not revenge, but the balance that holds all things together. The oldest story ever written begins not with gods or creation, but with a king who thought himself their equal, Gilgamesh of Uruk, a man so mighty the gods themselves felt threatened by his arrogance. 2 parts divine, 1 part mortal, he was a storm given human form, crushing rivals and lovers alike beneath his unchecked power. But the epic of Gilgamesh isn't just about strength, it's about the moment that strength meets its first true limit, death. And woven through it is Enkidu, the wild man made of clay and spit, whose friendship transforms Gilgamesh from a tyrant into a seeker of truths no mortal was meant to grasp. When we first meet Gilgamesh, he's less a hero and more a force of nature, his people groan under his excesses, his endless battles and demands. The gods, sensing imbalance, craft Enkidu to match him, a creature raised by beasts, his hair matted with leaves, his strength equal to Gilgamesh's own. Their first encounter is a clash that shakes the city walls, a battle so fierce it cracks the earth. But when neither can defeat the other, something unexpected happens. Respect blossoms into friendship. Enkidu, lured from the wilderness by a priestess, becomes the mirror Gilgamesh never knew he needed. Through him, the king learns humility, camaraderie, even joy. Together, they slay the monstrous Humbaba and defy the gods by cutting down the sacred cedar forest, their bond seemingly unbreakable. Then fate twists the knife. Enkidu falls ill, cursed by the gods for their arrogance. For 12 days, Gilgamesh watches his friend wither, begging any deity who will listen to spare him. But no miracle comes. Enkidu's death isn't just a loss, it's Gilgamesh's first taste of powerlessness. The king, who once believed himself invincible, now clutches Enkidu's lifeless body, screaming into the silence. This is the pivot of the epic, the moment immortality ceases to be an abstract concept and becomes an obsession. If even Enkidu, forged by divine hands, could perish, what hope does Gilgamesh have? So begins his desperate journey to cheat death. He crosses poisoned rivers and climbs impossible mountains, seeking Utnapishtim, the lone mortal granted eternal life. The answer he receives is brutal in its simplicity. Immortality isn't for the likes of him. Utnapishtim offers a test: stay awake for 7 days, just as the gods did during the Great Flood. Gilgamesh fails instantly, succumbing to sleep like any mortal. As a consolation, he's given a plant that restores youth, only for a serpent to steal it while he bathes. The message is clear: death isn't a foe to be conquered, but a boundary that defines what it means to be human. What makes this 4,000-year-old story so timeless is its raw honesty. Gilgamesh returns to Uruk empty-handed yet transformed. He doesn't gain eternal life, but something more precious: the wisdom to value the time he has. The epic's closing lines describe the mighty walls of Uruk, built not by an immortal, but by a man who learned to channel his strength into legacy. In the end, Gilgamesh's greatest power wasn't his divine blood or his battles. It was his ability to stare into the abyss of mortality and still choose to build, to rule, to live. And perhaps that's the lesson etched into these ancient tablets, that true strength lies not in defying death, but in embracing what makes life worth fighting for. The forests of Japan have always whispered with more than just wind. They hum with the presence of kami, the spirits woven into every rock, river, and thunderclap. At the heart of this shimmering tapestry stands Amaterasu, the sun goddess whose light isn't just celestial, but a sacred covenant between heaven and earth. When she retreats into a cave, plunging the world into darkness, it's not a tantrum, it's a cosmic crisis. The other gods don't plead or pray. They throw a riotous party outside her cave, dangling a mirror and beads so mesmerizing that her curiosity pulls her back into the sky. This myth isn't just about the sun's return, it's a lesson in balance. Amaterasu's light sustains life, but her absence reveals how fragile that balance truly is, how even divinity needs joy to keep the world turning. Then there's her brother Susanoo, the storm god whose moods are as tempestuous as the squalls he commands. Where Amaterasu is steady radiance, Susanoo is chaos incarnate, flinging mountains into the sea, tormenting his sister until she hides in that cave. But his story doesn't end in villainy. Exiled to Earth, he stumbles upon a grieving family, their 8 daughters devoured yearly by an 8-headed serpent. Here, the god of destruction becomes a savior. Susanoo doesn't just slay the beast, he outwits it, luring it with sake before slicing it apart, discovering the legendary sword Kusanagi in its tail. This twist captures the essence of kami. They're not neatly divided into good or evil. Susanoo's storms ravage crops, yes, but they also carve rivers and nourish the land. His violence births renewal. Shinto shrines, those vermilion gates nestled between skyscrapers and rice fields, embody this duality. Every Torii gate marks a threshold where the mundane brushes against the divine, where humans offer rice, salt, or prayers to kami who are neither omnipotent nor detached but deeply intertwined with earthly life. A waterfall might house a spirit demanding respect. A centuries-old tree could be a vessel for ancestral wisdom. This isn't pantheism, it's an intimacy with the sacred that defies categorization. What makes these myths endure isn't their grandeur, but their immediacy. Farmers still pray to Amaterasu for harvests, fishermen whisper apologies to the kami of the sea before casting nets, and festivals reenact Susanoo's victories to channel his ferocity against modern struggles. The tales don't belong to some distant past, they're alive in the steam rising from a bowl of rice, the sudden hush of a forest path, or the way sunlight fractures through shrine gates at dawn. To stand in a Shinto ceremony isn't to watch tradition. It's to step into a story where the boundary between storyteller and spirit has always been thin as rice paper. In the mist-shrouded hills of Britain, where history bleeds into legend, one sword carries the weight of a nation's destiny: Excalibur, the blade that chose a king. But Arthur Pendragon's story isn't just about a weapon pulled from stone. It's a prophecy woven by Merlin's riddles, a tapestry of divine right and human frailty. When young Arthur, barely more than a squire, draws that sword where seasoned knights failed, it's not brute strength that triumphs. The stone itself recognizes something deeper, a leader anointed not by birth, but by some inscrutable magic older than crowns. Excalibur's power isn't just in its unbreakable edge. It's in the covenant it creates between king and land, a bond as tangible as the sword's hilt in Arthur's grip. Merlin, the half-demon prophet with eyes that see through time, knows this truth better than anyone. His whispers shape Arthur's path long before the boy knows his own name. In one version of the myth, he engineers Arthur's birth through other Pendragon's enchanted union with Igraine, blurring the line between destiny and manipulation. His prophecies are never straightforward, they're riddles wrapped in storms, like his warning that Arthur's greatest love, Guinevere, would also be his undoing. This isn't mere foresight, it's the cruel irony of a power that reveals futures but can't alter them. Merlin's magic doesn't just guide Arthur, it ensnares him in a web of inevitability where every triumph sows the seeds of tragedy. And then there's the Lady of the Lake, the spectral hand that rises from watery depths to gift Excalibur after Arthur loses his first sword. Here, the myth takes a darker turn. The sword comes with a scabbard said to make its bearer invincible, yet both are eventually stolen by Morgana, Arthur's half-sister and nemesis. The lesson is stark, divine gifts can be revoked. The very magic that crowns Arthur also makes him vulnerable, tying his fate to objects that can be lost or betrayed. Even Excalibur, returned to the lake by Sir Bedivere after Arthur's final battle, carries a paradox. It both legitimizes kingship and underscores its fragility. What makes these legends endure isn't their magic alone, but how they mirror the tensions of real rule. Arthur's round table, where all knights sit as equals, is a revolutionary ideal in a feudal world, yet it crumbles from within. Lancelot's betrayal isn't just a love affair, it's the failure of divine right to account for human hearts. Mordred's rebellion exposes the peril of legacy, how even a sword forged by gods can't shield a king from his own blood. By the time Arthur sails to Avalon, wounded and hollow-eyed, the message is clear. Power, even enchanted power, doesn't absolve rulers of their humanity. Perhaps that's why Excalibur still gleams in our collective imagination. It represents not just might, but the weight of the choices that come with it. When Arthur wields it, he doesn't just fight enemies, he wrestles with the cost of justice, the limits of mercy, and the loneliness of leadership. The sword's true magic isn't in its edge, but in the reflection it forces upon those who hold it, that the right to rule isn't taken from stone, but earned in the keeping of promises both to a kingdom and to oneself. Deep in the forests of Slavic folklore, where moonlight filters through birch trees like liquid silver, a creature of impossible brilliance dances just beyond mortal reach, the Firebird, its feathers shimmering with flames that never burn, its song a melody that bends the night itself. To glimpse it is to hunger, to chase it is to embark on a quest that will unravel your soul. This isn't just a magical creature, it's a living paradox, a beacon of wonder that lures kings and peasants alike into the shadows where desire and doom intertwine. The Firebird's allure lies in its duality. Its feathers glow like captured embers, casting light enough to read by midnight, yet they're cool to the touch, defying the laws of nature. In some tales, just one fallen plume can illuminate an entire kingdom for years, a prize so coveted that tsars send their bravest knights and their most cunning thieves to claim it. But the Firebird is never caught through force. It vanishes like mist at dawn, leaving pursuers grasping at echoes. The message is clear. This is a being that can't be owned, only witnessed in fleeting, heart-stopping moments. To seek it is to confront the very nature of longing, the way beauty taunts us by existing just beyond our grasp. Yet the Firebird isn't merely a tease, it's a catalyst. When Prince Ivan, the archetypal hero of these tales, follows its trail, he doesn't just find a bird, he stumbles into a labyrinth of tests. A talking wolf offers cryptic guidance. Baba Yaga, the bone-legged witch, demands riddles be solved. Even the Firebird's theft of golden apples from the Tsar's orchard isn't random mischief. It's the first thread in a tapestry of trials meant to separate the worthy from the reckless. The brilliance here is how the Firebird's role shifts. It begins as the object of desire, but the real treasure is the transformation its pursuit ignites. Ivan doesn't return the same man who left. He returns scarred, wiser, and often with a bride won not by wealth or weapons, but by humility and wit. What gives these stories their haunting resonance is how they mirror the human condition. The Firebird is the embodiment of dreams we chase but never fully hold: artistic inspiration, true love, even immortality. Its flames don't burn, they illuminate the cost of obsession. In one variant, a greedy Tsar who cages the Firebird finds his palace reduced to ashes not by the bird, but by his own insatiable greed. The creature itself escapes unharmed because some wonders refuse to be tamed. Slavic elders sometimes say the Firebird doesn't belong to our world at all. It's a visitor from the other world, a place where logic unravels and animals speak in riddles. Its appearances are both gift and test, a way for the unseen forces to measure mortal hearts. To see the Firebird and do nothing means you've lost your sense of wonder. To chase it blindly means you've lost your way, but to follow with open eyes, to let its light expose your flaws and forge your courage, that's how ordinary souls become the heroes of their own tales. That's the secret hidden in the Firebird's flames. It isn't the prize, it's the mirror showing us who we are when we face the impossible, and who we might become if we dare to keep walking toward the light. Among the crashing waves of the Pacific, where the horizon stretches endlessly and the stars themselves seem to whisper ancient secrets, one figure stands taller than the ocean's fury: Maui, the trickster demigod whose audacity reshaped the world. This isn't just a tale of strength, it's a saga of ingenuity where even the sun isn't too mighty to be challenged. When Maui's people complained that the days were too short, that the sun raced across the sky without giving them time to fish or cook, he didn't beg the gods for mercy. He braided ropes from his sister's hair stronger than any vine and lassoed the sun itself as it rose from its eastern pit. The battle that followed wasn't just a tug of war, it was a negotiation. Maui's blows with his enchanted jawbone club forced the sun to promise a slower path, lengthening the days for all humanity. This wasn't just a feat of might, it was an act of cosmic rebellion, proving that even the smallest beings could bargain with the forces of nature. But Maui's legend doesn't stop at bending time. His fishing exploits are the stuff of islanders' dreams, literally. With a hook carved from the bones of his ancestors and bait made from his own blood, he cast his line into the depths, not for fish but for land. The colossal catch he hauled up, Ika e Maui, the fish of Maui, became the North Island of Aotearoa, its mountains and valleys shaped by the struggles of the hunt. The South Island, that's his canoe frozen in stone. These aren't just stories, they're maps woven into the very geography of Polynesia, explaining why rivers curve like fishing lines and why certain bays echo with the sound of Maui's laughter. Yet for all his heroism, Maui's greatest lesson lies in his failures. His attempt to win immortality for humankind by crawling into the goddess of death's womb to reverse the cycle of life ended disastrously, cut short by the laughter of a startled bird. The message is bittersweet. Even the cleverest demigod can't outwit mortality, but in that failure, Maui becomes more than a myth, he becomes a mirror. His flaws, his impulsiveness, his ego, his relentless drive to push boundaries are human ones. When he steals fire from the underworld to give to humanity, he doesn't do it as a benevolent god, but as a troublemaker who couldn't resist a challenge. That's the heart of Maui's enduring appeal. He's not an untouchable deity, he's the sibling who drags you into mischief, the underdog who refuses to accept limits. His stories aren't just about creation, they're about disruption. every island fished up, every sun tamed, every law of nature bent, asks the same question: why should things stay as they are? And in that question lies the spark of every human innovation, every rebellion against the status quo. Maui's legacy isn't just in the land he shaped, but in the courage to reach for what seems impossible, even when failure is part of the tale. In the dense forests and sun-baked villages of West Africa, where wisdom often wears the disguise of mischief, no figure dances between brilliance and chaos quite like Anansi the spider. This isn't your garden variety arachnid. Anansi is a shape-shifting trickster, a storyteller whose webs aren't just spun from silk, but from riddles, schemes, and hard-won lessons. His tales, passed down through generations like precious heirlooms, reveal a truth that resonates far beyond the jungle. Sometimes the smallest creatures wield the sharpest minds. Take the famous story of how Anansi claimed all the world's stories for himself. The sky god Niame refused to share them unless Anansi could complete 4 impossible tasks: capturing a hornet's nest, a python, a leopard, and a fairy. Impossible for a human, perhaps, but Anansi, barely the size of a man's palm, outthought them all. He tricked the hornets by convincing them rain was coming, offering a hollow gourd as shelter, then sealed them inside. He spun a web of flattery around the python, persuading the serpent to stretch beside a pole so he could measure its length, only to tie it up. The leopard, a pit disguised as a game; the fairy, a doll smeared with sticky sap, trapping her when she slapped it in anger. Each victory wasn't just clever, it was a masterclass in turning weakness into strength, proving that brains could outmaneuver brawn every time. Yet Anansi's genius isn't just in winning, it's in the consequences that follow. His triumphs often backfire in ways that stitch morality into the fabric of the tale. One yarn tells of him hoarding crops during a famine, only for his greed to leave him dangling from a tree, trapped in his own web. Another sees him stealing a magic pot that cooks endlessly, but his carelessness floods the village with porridge. The lesson isn't just don't be greedy, it's that wit without wisdom is a knife without a handle. What makes Anansi timeless is how he mirrors human flaws. He's lazy yet resourceful, selfish yet charming, a liar who somehow always leads us to truth. Parents recount his escapades to children not as fables of perfection, but as cautionary comedies, because Anansi doesn't just teach right from wrong. He shows how messy the journey between them can be, and perhaps that's why his stories still thrive today, whispered in Caribbean marketplaces and written into modern novels. Anansi isn't just a character, he's a mirror held up to our own cunning and folly, reminding us that even when we're caught in life's sticky webs, the thread to freedom might just be a clever twist away. High above the mist-shrouded pyramids of ancient Mesoamerica, where jaguars prowl the spirit world and blood holds the memory of creation, the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl makes a choice no god should have to face, to bleed for beings not yet born. This isn't just another creation myth, it's a cosmic heist, a sacrifice so profound it reshapes the very definition of divinity. Unlike distant sky gods who command from on high, Quetzalcoatl kneels in the dirt of Mictlan, the underworld, grinding his own bones with those of previous suns to knead the dough of humanity. His blood isn't spilled in battle or rage, it's given freely, drop by drop, to animate the clay figures molded by his hands. The genius of this myth lies in its inversion of power. Quetzalcoatl, whose very name means precious twin, embodies the union of opposites serpent and bird, earth and sky, mortality and eternity. Where other gods demand blood from their creations, he reverses the flow. When the first humans lie lifeless after being fashioned from maize and sacred waters, it's not prayers or offerings that awaken them, it's the serpent god's own divine essence, poured from a wound in his leg. This act ripples through Aztec cosmology like a shockwave. Suddenly, gods aren't just takers, they're givers. The relationship between divine and mortal isn't one of master and subject, but of shared substance. Every heartbeat in an Aztec child's chest carries echoes of Quetzalcoatl's sacrifice. But the serpent's gifts don't end there. In the sprawling Aztec pantheon, where gods battle for supremacy and worlds rise and fall in cycles, Quetzalcoatl steals something even more precious than life knowledge. Disguised as a black ant, he infiltrates the mountain of the stingy grain god Tonacatacutli to steal maize, the sustenance that would lift humanity beyond mere survival. Later, he shatters the heavenly mirror that hoards the stars, scattering them across the night sky so all might navigate by their light. Each act defies the hoarding instincts of older gods, insisting that wisdom, like breath, should belong to everyone. The tragedy and the lesson comes in the aftermath. For all his benevolence, Quetzalcoatl is still bound by cosmic rules. When tricked by his rival Tezcatlipoca into drunkenness and disgrace, he doesn't unleash vengeance. He walks into the Eastern Sea, vowing to return one day. Spanish conquistadors would later twist this promise to their advantage, but the original prophecy carries a deeper truth. True power isn't in domination, but in the willingness to step aside when the balance demands it. What makes this myth endure isn't just its vivid imagery, the iridescent feathers brushing against blood-stained clay, but its radical empathy. In a culture often stereotyped for its ritual sacrifices, here stands a god who sacrifices for rather than to. When modern artisans in Mexico City mold clay figures inspired by ancient traditions, or farmers bless their maize fields with whispers of gratitude, they're not just keeping myth alive. They're honoring a truth as old as humanity's first breath, that we are, all of us, children of a serpent who chose to bleed so we might rise. On a mountain that kissed the heavens and a stone egg bathed in celestial winds, something impossible stirred. A monkey not born of flesh, but carved from the earth's laughter and the sky's fury. This was Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, whose first act of rebellion wasn't against gods or men, but against fate itself. When he burst from that egg, fully formed and already bristling with defiance, the heavens shuddered. Here was a creature who'd trade immortality for mischief, divinity for freedom, and still come out laughing. His legend, immortalized in Journey to the West, reads like a whirlwind of chaos and cunning. Early on, Sun Wukong masters 72 earthly transformations, not just shape-shifting, but essence-shifting. He becomes a towering giant to shake the pillars of heaven, a delicate sparrow to slip through imperial guards, even a temple with his mouth as the door and eyes as windows, ready to devour unsuspecting monks. His combat skills are no less extraordinary. With his staff, Rui Jingu Bang, a weapon that obeys his thoughts, shrinking to a needle or stretching across the cosmos, he fights entire celestial armies to a standstill. The Dragon King's oceans stirred into tsunamis, the Jade Emperor's forces scattered like leaves. Even Erlang Shen, heaven's greatest warrior, needs help from Laozi's cosmic furnace to subdue him, and even that only tempers Sun Wukong's rage into something sharper. But the heart of his story isn't just raw power, it's transformation. After Buddha himself traps the Monkey King beneath 5 Elements Mountain for 5 centuries, Sun Wukong's journey pivots from conquest to redemption. Forced to escort the monk Tang Sanzang on a perilous pilgrimage, his tricks become tools, his arrogance tempered into wisdom, yet he never loses his spark. When demons ambush the group, it's Sun Wukong's unorthodox brilliance that saves them, whether by plucking hairs to clone an army or tricking villains into drinking his invincible urine disguised as holy water. The message is clear: enlightenment doesn't erase identity, it refines it. What makes Sun Wukong timeless isn't just his defiance, but his duality. He's a god who eats peaches meant for immortality feasts, a hero who steals heavenly horses just for fun, and eventually a Buddha who still grins at the memory of his chaos. In modern China, children wear his mask during festivals not to worship, but to channel that indomitable spirit, the part of us that refuses to kneel even when the weight of the world presses down. His legacy whispers that even the wildest souls have a place in the cosmos, not despite their flaws, but because of them. The Monkey King didn't just climb to enlightenment, he somersaulted there on a cloud of laughter, leaving even the gods scrambling to catch up. High in the thin air of the Andes, where the horizon seems to scrape against the sky, the Incas told of a god who walked the land not with thunder or fire, but with quiet intention. Viracocha, the foam of the sea, whose very touch brought forth civilizations from barren rock. Unlike the dramatic creations of floods or cosmic battles found in other myths, his story begins in stillness. Emerging from Lake Titicaca's depths, he didn't just shape the world, he taught it, molding the mountains with his hands and breathing life into the first people, who stepped from caves and springs as if waking from a dream. But Viracocha's greatest marvels weren't just the peaks he raised or the rivers he carved, they were the questions he left behind. After teaching humanity the arts of farming, weaving, and governance, he walked westward into the Pacific, promising to return. This departure wasn't marked by grand cataclysm or battle. It was a vanishing, a god dissolving into the mist like the morning fog over Machu Picchu. The Incas, master engineers who built empires on sheer cliffs, were left with a puzzle. Was Viracocha a creator, a teacher, or something far more enigmatic? His legacy is etched into the land itself: terraced farms that defy gravity, roads that stitch together clouds, and stones fitted so tightly a blade of grass can't slip between them. These weren't just feats of engineering, they were acts of devotion, attempts to mirror the precision of a god who shaped the world without leaving a seam. The mystery deepens with the Spanish conquest. When bearded strangers arrived on ships, some Incas wondered if these were Viracocha's returning children, a tragic misinterpretation that would unravel an empire. Yet even in this collision of worlds, Viracocha's paradox endured. A god who brought order but left no clear commandments, who built a civilization but refused to rule it. Modern archaeologists still grapple with his echoes. The ruins of Tiwanaku, with its monolithic gate of the sun, show carvings of a weeping figure. Some say it's Viracocha, shedding tears for the world he shaped but couldn't protect. What lingers isn't just the myth, but the quiet challenge it poses. The Incas didn't just worship Viracocha, they emulated him, turning the brutal Andes into a cradle of life with nothing but patience and stone tools. His story isn't about dominion, but stewardship, a reminder that creation isn't a single act, but a dialogue between hands and earth, between the divine and the daily. When the mist curls around the peaks at dawn, it's easy to imagine him still walking there, not as a ruler, but as the first architect, whispering to those who listen that the greatest monuments aren't built to impress the gods, but to honor the fragile balance they began. Across the windswept plains and sprawling deserts of Native American lore, where the land speaks in whispers and lessons hide in laughter, one figure dances between wisdom and absurdity: Coyote, the trickster whose very name conjures chaos. He's no ordinary creature. In one breath, he shapes mountains and steals fire for humanity. In the next, he's duped by his own reflection or loses his eyes in a gambling match with rocks. This isn't just storytelling, it's a masterclass in duality, where the same paws that mold the world also trip over their own mischief. Take the Nez Perce tale of Coyote and the monster. When a giant serpent swallows all the animals, leaving the world barren, Coyote doesn't charge in with claws bared. He lets himself be swallowed whole, then cuts his way free from inside, freeing the others in a burst of ingenuity. Yet moments later, he's squabbling over who gets the fattest piece of the slain monster, his greed nearly reigniting the threat. The pattern repeats endlessly. Coyote outwits winter itself by stealing its daughter, only to botch the ritual that would keep cold at bay forever. He convinces the gods to let humans keep their souls after death, then accidentally scatters them across the land, ensuring mortality stays messy. Every victory is laced with imperfection, every act of creation tinged with folly. Why celebrate such a flawed figure? Because Coyote isn't just a character, he's a mirror held up to human nature. The Crow people tell of him trying to fly by strapping birds to his arms, crashing spectacularly, yet still inspiring the first dreamers. The Navajo recount how he planted stars in the sky but did it haphazardly, leaving some constellations crooked. His failures aren't just comic relief, they're reminders that even the most powerful forces stumble. When he tricks buffalo into giving themselves as food to the people, only to later starve because he forgot to save meat for himself, the lesson is clear: wisdom and foolishness aren't opposites. They're threads in the same tapestry. What makes these stories endure isn't just their humor, but their honesty. Coyote doesn't preach purity or perfection. He embodies the messy, vital truth that progress often comes with missteps, that creation and destruction ride the same wind. When modern storytellers resurrect his antics, whether in children's books or tribal council debates, they're not just preserving tradition. They're honoring a truth as old as the first campfire, that sometimes the best way to teach isn't with a stern face, but with a laugh that shakes the stars loose all over again. Beneath the shifting sands of Arabian deserts and woven through the flickering lamplight of bazaars, there exists a world parallel to our own, one where fire bends to thought and every whispered wish carries the weight of consequence. This is the realm of the jinn, those enigmatic beings of smokeless flame who shape the heart of 1001 Nights. Unlike the jennies of modern pop culture, reduced to comical sidekicks in lamps, the original jinn are creatures of terrifying depth, their powers matched only by their caprice. To understand them is to unravel a tapestry of human longing, where every granted desire comes threaded with peril. Take the tale of the fisherman and the jinn, where a poor man's cast net pulls up a sealed brass vessel. When he pries it open, smoke erupts into the sky, coalescing into a towering figure who roars, "I shall grant you a choice of deaths." This jinn isn't grateful for his freedom, he's vengeful after centuries of imprisonment, his gratitude twisted into wrath. Yet the fisherman, with nothing but wit, tricks the jinn back into the pot by feigning disbelief that such a massive being could ever fit inside. The lesson is stark: power, unchecked by wisdom, becomes its own prison. The jinn's might is undone by mortal cunning, proving that even the weakest can outmaneuver raw strength when they understand the rules of the game. Then there's the darker undercurrent, the jinn as mirrors of human folly. In the story of the Enchanted City, a prince discovers a metropolis frozen in time, its inhabitants turned to stone. The cause, a jinn's curse, unleashed when the king refused to honor a promise to a humble stranger, who reveals himself as a jinn in disguise. Here, the supernatural punishment isn't arbitrary, it's a direct response to human betrayal. The jinn's wrath exposes the fragility of oaths and the cascading consequences of broken trust. But not all jinn are agents of chaos. Some, like the ones who aid Aladdin, a later addition to the Knights, blur the line between servant and sovereign. The famous slave of the lamp obeys commands, yes, but his magic operates with eerie precision. Wish for a feast, and it materializes, but the unasked for cost might be the envy of neighbors or the rot of uneaten food. The underlying message whispers through every story: desires fulfilled without foresight unravel as quickly as they're woven. What makes these tales endure isn't just their exotic sheen, but their razor-sharp psychology. The jinn embody the double-edged nature of ambition, the seductive danger of shortcuts. When a merchant in one story accidentally kills a jinn's son with a tossed date pit, the spirit demands his life in return until 3 passing travelers intervene with stories so gripping the jinn spares the man in awe. Here, storytelling itself becomes a kind of magic, disarming vengeance with the power of narrative. It's a meta-commentary on Scheherazad's own plight, where words are the only defense against destruction. The genius of the jinn lore lies in its refusal to paint its supernatural beings as mere villains or saviors. They're as complex as the humans they entwine with, capable of breathtaking generosity or bottomless spite, often in the same breath. To bargain with a jinn is to stare into your own soul's reflection, where every wish granted reveals what you're willing to sacrifice. So the next time you rub an old lamp, remember, the real magic isn't in the wish, but in understanding what you'll become after it's granted. In the vast, snow-laced forests of Finland, where the northern lights dance like spirits and every lake holds the reflection of unseen worlds, magic doesn't come from wands or potions, it comes from song. Here, in the land of the Kalevala, the ancient epic that weaves together shamanic chants and creation myths, power hums in the throat of Väinämöinen, the eternal bard whose melodies can carve rivers, heal wounds, and even stop the sun in its tracks. This isn't just music, it's the fabric of reality itself, spun from syllables older than the trees. Väinämöinen's greatest feat begins with a lament. When the land is barren and the people starve, he doesn't pray to the gods for mercy. He sings the Sampo into existence, a mystical artifact forged not in fire but in rhythm. The Sampo is no ordinary treasure. It's a cosmic mill that grinds out endless salt, grain, and gold. A symbol of prosperity so potent it becomes the obsession of heroes and sorcerers alike. Yet its creation isn't a battle of strength but a duel of duets. The smith Ilmarinen, Väinämöinen's rival, must harmonize his hammer strikes with the bard's incantations, their voices intertwining like threads in a loom. The result isn't just an object but a living testament to the Finnish belief that words, when sung with intention, can shape the material world. But the Kalevala's magic isn't just in grand gestures. It's in the quiet, everyday incantations, the spells woven into lullabies, the curses hidden in a herder's call. When Lauhai, the witch of the north, steals the sun and moon, plunging the world into darkness, Väinämöinen doesn't raise an army. He raises his voice, piecing together a new sun from splinters of song and fragments of light. Even his failures are instructive. In one haunting tale, his attempt to craft a boat through melody falters because he forgets three crucial words, proof that magic, like language, is a craft requiring precision. What makes these stories extraordinary is their grounding in oral tradition. For centuries, Finnish rune singers passed down the Kalevala not as static verses but as living, breathing rituals. Each performance was an act of recreation, the singer's breath animating the old words anew. This wasn't mere storytelling, it was a sacred collaboration between past and present, where every note carried the weight of ancestors. Even today, when a cantel, the harp Väinämöinen fashioned from a pike's jaw, is played, you're not just hearing music, you're hearing the echo of a spell first cast millennia ago. The lesson of the Kalevala lingers long after the last note fades. That magic isn't confined to myth. It's in the stories we repeat, the songs we teach our children, the promises we whisper into the wind. Väinämöinen's power wasn't just in his voice, but in his understanding that words, once released, never truly disappear. They ripple outward, bending the world in ways we may never see but can always feel. In the swirling mists of Yoruba cosmology, where the divine walks hand in hand with the everyday, the Orishas aren't distant deities, they're the living pulse of rivers, forges, and thunderstorms. At the heart of this pantheon stand three pillars of raw spiritual power. Ogun, the blacksmith king who cracked open the earth's secrets with iron. Yamoja, the womb of the world whose waters birth both life and destiny. And Shango, the fire wielder who dances with lightning as his drumbeat. These aren't just gods of elements, they're embodiments of the forces that shaped civilizations. Their stories etched into the hammers of artisans, the tides of motherhood, and the sudden, searing justice of the skies. Ogun's domain begins where rock meets flame. The first patron of metallurgy, he didn't just gift humanity with tools, he taught them to transform chaos into order. Legend says he cleared primordial forests with his machete, carving paths where none existed, but his true power lies in the sacred pact between sweat and metal. When a blacksmith in Oyo pounds red-hot iron, They're not just shaping a blade, they're channeling Ogun's Asay, the spiritual energy that turns ore into plows, spears, and the very nails that hold communities together. Yet Ogun's duality is razor-edged, the same force that builds can destroy. Warriors invoke him before battle, but so do surgeons before incisions, a reminder that creation and destruction are two sides of the same gleaming sword. Then there's Yamoja, whose name means mother whose children are the fish. She's not merely a goddess of rivers and oceans, she's the amniotic tide that cradles all existence. When a midwife in Lagos chants her prayers during childbirth, she's calling on Yamoja's primal current, the same force that once flooded the world to cleanse it of corruption. Her worshippers wear blue and white beads like droplets of her essence, and her festivals see devotees dancing with bowls of water balanced on their heads, their bodies becoming vessels of her fluid grace. But don't mistake her tenderness for weakness. Yamoja's waves can soothe or swallow, nurture or drown. She's the comfort of a lullaby and the fury of a riptide, teaching that true strength flows, adapts, and sometimes crashes down without warning. And then comes Shango, the Thunder King, whose very laughter rumbles in the belly of storms. His power crackles in the split second before lightning strikes, unpredictable, electrifying, irrevocable. Unlike Zeus's distant bolts, Shango's fire is intimately personal. His devotees in Trinidad and Nigeria alike tremble in possession trances, their bodies convulsing as his energy surges through them, wielding double-headed axes that mirror the jagged paths of his divine strikes. Yet for all his ferocity, Shango's myth is steeped in tragedy. Once a mortal king framed for tyranny, his suicide by hanging transformed him into an Orisha, his noose becoming the chain that now binds justice to the cosmos. When lightning splits a tree, it's not just destruction, it's Shango's verdict, a reminder that truth, like electricity, always finds the quickest path to ground. What binds these Orishas together isn't just their dominance over elements, but how they mirror the human condition. Ogun's forge reflects our struggle to shape meaning from raw struggle. Yamoja's tides echo the ebb and flow of love and loss. Shango's storms embody the sudden, searing moments that redefine lives. To kneel at their altars isn't just worship, it's recognition. The Yoruba don't see these forces as separate from daily life. They're the breath in the blacksmith's lungs, the salt on a mother's lips, the charge in the air before a reckoning. Their lessons aren't locked in temples, they're alive in every choice to build, to nurture, or to stand firm when the sky itself seems to fracture. And perhaps that's the real magic, not in the gods themselves, but in how they remind us that divinity isn't above us. It's in our hands, our tears, and the fire we carry even when the night is darkest. High in the thin, knife-edged peaks of the Himalayas, where the air is too thin for most living things and blizzards erase entire trails in minutes, the line between flesh and spirit blurs. Here, the Yeti isn't just a creature, it's a walking paradox, a shadow that flickers between myth and marrow. To Sherpa guides, it's the Migoi, the wild man whose footprints vanish into sheer cliffs. To Tibetan monks, it's the Rikshasas, a remnant of an older world, a keeper of secrets too vast for human minds. And to Western explorers, a puzzle begging to be solved. A missing link that's left tufts of fur on prayer flags and footprints in snow that defy zoology. The Yeti's power lies in its elusiveness. Those who claim encounters describe contradictions, a beast both ape-like and human, covered in white or reddish hair, smelling of rot or wet earth, silent as snowfall or roaring like avalanches. These inconsistencies aren't flaws in the legend, they're the point. The Yeti mirrors the landscape itself, unpredictable, untamable, and utterly indifferent to human logic. When Sir Edmund Hillary returned from Everest with a supposed Yeti scalp in 1954, scientists dismissed it as goat hide, but the Sherpas who'd lived with the stories for centuries weren't disappointed. To them, the scalp's ordinariness was proof of something deeper. that the Yeti wasn't meant to be bagged and tagged, but to exist in the liminal space between knowing and wonder. Yet the Yeti isn't just a biological riddle. It's woven into the spiritual fabric of the Himalayas. Some monasteries guard Yeti relics not as curiosities, but as sacred objects, a finger bone encased in silver, a scrap of hide tucked into a reliquary. Pilgrims whisper that Yetis are protectors of hidden valleys like Baal, mythical sanctuaries where time moves differently and only the pure of heart may enter. In this light, the Yeti becomes a gatekeeper, a test. To see one isn't just luck, it's a sign you've strayed somewhere humanity wasn't meant to tread. Modern science, of course, has tried to demystify the legend. DNA tests on alleged Yeti hair often reveal matches to Himalayan bears or local wolves. But here's the twist: these debunkings might hold the key to the myth's endurance. Indigenous cultures have long spoken of animals as more than mere biology, bears as ancestral spirits, wolves as messengers. A Sherpa who sees a Yeti footprint might be looking at a bear's, yes, but also at something older, a memory encoded in the land itself. The Yeti isn't a failed science experiment. It's a story the mountains tell to remind us how much we still don't understand. Perhaps the most haunting Yeti tale isn't of a sighting, but of a sound. Mountaineers on Makolu's slopes once described a cry that wasn't wind or beast, a howl that seemed to come from the rocks themselves. It's this quality that makes the Yeti eternal. It's not just a creature, but the embodiment of high places' uncanniness, the chill down your spine when you realize you're not just alone on a mountain. You're being watched by something that knows the peaks far better than you ever will. And maybe, just maybe, that's how it should stay. Beneath the churning rivers and silent depths of New Zealand's lakes, creatures of legend stir not as monsters, but as guardians, teachers, and sometimes warnings. These are the Taniwha, the Maui water spirits whose very existence blurs the line between myth and ecology. To call them simply dragons would miss the point entirely. A Taniwha might appear as a giant serpent, a shark with obsidian teeth, or even a log that suddenly moves against the current. Their forms are as fluid as the waters they inhabit, reflecting a truth deeper than folklore. That nature itself is neither wholly kind nor cruel, but fiercely alive with lessons for those who pay attention. Every Taniwha story is a map not just of geography but of values. Take the tale of Hatupuku, who lurked near Rotorua, swallowing travelers whole until a cunning warrior tricked him by rolling a heated stone into the beast's path. When Hatupuku gulped it down, the fire in his belly forced him to disgorge all his victims, alive and unharmed. This isn't just a monster hunt, it's a lesson in ingenuity and consequences. The Taniwha isn't slain but outsmarted, his power neutralized by understanding rather than brute force. Even in defeat, Hatupuku's presence lingers, a reminder that danger and wisdom often share the same waters. Yet not all Taniwha are threats. Many are kaishiaki, protectors of specific tribes or lands. The great Taniwha Tuharangi guided the ancestral canoe Takatimu through treacherous currents, his dorsal fin cutting through waves like a sacred compass. To this day, Maori fishermen whisper prayers to him before setting out, not as superstition, but as acknowledgement of a covenant between people and the unseen forces that shape their survival. These bonds aren't metaphorical. Modern road construction in New Zealand has been rerouted to avoid disturbing Taniwha domains, a tangible respect for stories that colonial maps once dismissed as fantasy. The duality of Taniwha mirrors the Maori worldview, where nothing is purely good or evil. A river might nourish a village with fish, then drown a careless child in its undertow. The Taniwha embodies this balance, acting as both benefactor and enforcer of natural law. When the Wanganui River was granted legal personhood in 2017, a landmark decision rooted in Maori belief, it wasn't just bureaucracy, it was the Taniwha's legacy, a formal recognition that waterways are living entities with rights and rhythms of their own. What makes these stories endure isn't their spectacle, but their intimacy. A Taniwha isn't a distant myth. It's the ripple in a favorite fishing spot that suddenly feels watchful, the log that wasn't there yesterday. Parents warn children not to swim in certain pools, not to frighten them, but to teach respect for forces older than human memory. The Taniwha doesn't need to exist in a scientific sense to shape behavior, ecology, even legislation. It thrives in the space between literal and symbolic, a bridge between ancestors and the living, between reverence and caution. To understand Taniwha is to grasp a truth that Western ecology is only beginning to articulate, that the natural world isn't a resource to exploit, but a network of relationships to negotiate. The next time you stand by a riverbank, listen closely. The water's voice might sound like wind or current, but beneath it, perhaps, pulses the slow, deep heartbeat of a story waiting to be remembered. High above the Persian peaks, where the air thins into eternity and the clouds themselves seem to bow, a creature of impossible wisdom watches the centuries turn, the simurgh, whose feathers hold the secrets of the ages. This isn't just a mythical bird risen from flames like its phoenix cousins. It's a celestial librarian, a being so ancient it has witnessed the rise and fall of 30 kings before the first brick of Babylon was laid. In Persian epic poetry, particularly in Ferdowsi's Shahnameh and Attar's Conference of the Birds, the simurgh doesn't merely appear. It intervenes, steering the fates of heroes and rulers with the patience of a tutor and the foresight of a seer. Consider Zal, the white-haired outcast prince abandoned as an infant on Mount Alborz for his unnatural appearance. Left to die, he's found not by humans but by the simurgh, who carries him to her nest not as prey but as a pupil. Here, the bird becomes more than a rescuer. She's a foster mother who teaches Zal the language of the wind, the healing properties of herbs, and the weight of leadership. When Zal returns to human society, his wisdom becomes legendary, but the simurgh's gift isn't just knowledge. It's a single feather to be burned whenever he faces impossible peril. This feather becomes a lifeline, summoning her aid in battles and childbirth, a symbol that true guidance isn't about control, but about being present when called. Centuries later, Attar's Sufi masterpiece reinvents the simurgh as the ultimate destination of spiritual seekers. In the Conference of the Birds, 30 birds embark on a harrowing journey through 7 valleys of quest, love, understanding, detachment, unity, astonishment, and finally annihilation. When the survivors reach the simurgh's abode, exhausted and diminished, they peer into a lake and see not the bird but their own reflections. The revelation is breathtaking. Simurgh in Persian means 30 birds, and the divine wisdom they sought was within them all along. The simurgh here isn't a teacher but a mirror, reflecting the paradox that enlightenment comes not from finding answers but from losing the need to seek them. What makes the simurgh transcendent is its duality. It's both a creature of fable and a metaphor for the divine, as comfortable in the pages of King's Chronicles as in the meditations of mystics. In one tale, it advises a king to spare a conquered foe, preaching mercy as the mark of true power. In another, it heals a warrior's wounds with its tears, blending the magical and the medicinal. Unlike Western dragons or griffins, which often represent raw power to be conquered, the simurgh exists beyond such struggles. It's a force that nurtures, tests, and ultimately reveals the seeker to themselves. Modern Iran still whispers of the simurgh's legacy. Miniatures depict it with peacock-like plumage and a lion's claws, straddling the line between beauty and strength. Poets invoke it as a symbol of Iran's enduring resilience, a phoenix that rises each time history tries to reduce it to ashes. But perhaps its greatest lesson is one for our age of endless noise, that the most profound truths aren't shouted from mountaintops, but whispered in the rustle of feathers, waiting for those willing to listen not with their ears, but with their souls. Deep beneath the ceiba trees and star-scattered skies of the Mayan world, where the roots of the earth tangle with the realm of the dead, 2 brothers step onto a court where the stakes are more than life or loss, they're the very turning of time itself. Hunahpu and Xbalanque, the hero twins, aren't just playing a game against the lords of Xibalba, the Mayan underworld. They're rewriting the rules of existence, one defiant bounce of their rubber ball against the walls of destiny. The story begins with their father's failure, a previous ball player lured to Xibalba by the same death gods, tricked into a fatal game and sacrificed. His skull hung in a calabash tree, a warning to all who would challenge the underworld's dominion. But the twins, born from the spit of their father's skull and the magic of a moon goddess, inherit more than his legacy. They carry his vengeance and something far more dangerous, ingenuity. When the lords of Xibalba summon them, promising glory in their deadly ball game, the twins don't refuse. They descend the steep stairs into darkness, knowing the odds are rigged. The courts of Xibalba aren't meant for victory. They're designed to break hopeful souls with traps like the House of Gloom, the House of Knives, and the House of Fire, each a trial of fear as much as skill. Yet the twins don't rely on brute strength. They outwit the gods at every turn. When challenged to keep cigars and torches burning all night without consuming them, they fake it, painting fireflies to mimic embers. When forced to guard a bouquet from voracious ants, they summon leaf cutters to carry the flowers underground and return them unharmed. Their brilliance lies in understanding the loopholes of the cosmos, turning the gods' own tricks against them. And then comes the pivotal game, the one that's never truly about sport but symbolism. The ball court is a microcosm of the universe, the ball the sun itself, arcing between the realms of day and night, life and death. Every bounce echoes the Mayan belief in cyclical time, where endings birth new beginnings. When the twins finally allow themselves to be sacrificed, seemingly defeated, their bones ground and cast into a river, they perform the ultimate reversal. Reborn as catfish, then as wandering performers, they return to Xibalba in disguise, dazzling the death gods with magic no one has ever seen, sacrificing a dog and restoring it to life, burning a house and resurrecting it whole. In a final act of poetic justice, they lure the lords into volunteering for their own demise, promising to resurrect them as part of the act, only to leave them shattered, their power broken. The twins ascend to the sky, becoming the sun and moon, while the humbled lords of Xibalba are reduced to mere patrons of disease and misfortune. This isn't just a triumph of cleverness over cruelty. The twins' journey is a blueprint for resilience, a testament to the Mayan view of the cosmos as a place where darkness must be faced, not to conquer it, but to dance with it, to force it into balance. Their ball game isn't won by avoiding death, it's won by embracing its inevitability and still choosing to play. Every time a modern player in Guatemala or Belize strikes a rubber ball in the ancient game of Poc a Toc, they're not just keeping tradition alive. They're echoing a rhythm older than cities, a reminder that sometimes the only way to cheat death is to face it head-on and laugh. Wind howls across the bloodied fields of Germanic legend, carrying not just the stench of iron and sweat, but something far more chilling, the whispers of the Valkyries. These are no mere harbingers of death. They're the architects of destiny, winged women clad in armor that glints like ice, their very presence bending the threads of fate. When a warrior falls, it's not luck or chance that decides his end, it's their hands, cool and deliberate, selecting who will feast in Odin's hall and who will fade into the mist. This isn't just mythology, it's a window into the Norse soul, where honor and doom dance as intimately as blades in battle. Imagine the scene: a battle rages below, axes biting into shields, while above, the Valkyries ride shadowy steeds across the storm clouds. Their names alone evoke their power: Hilda, meaning battle; Gurndal, wand wielder; Skirgul, shaker. They don't just watch, they curate. With a touch, they still a spear mid-flight or guide a sword stroke to its mark, ensuring the chosen fall with valor intact. But here's the twist: their selections aren't random. A warrior who laughed in death's face might earn their favor, while one who cowered could be left to the carrion birds. The Valkyries don't just reward strength, they worship courage, the kind that sings even when the end is certain. Yet these shield maidens are more than Odin's recruiters. They're psychopomps with agency, weaving their own stories into the tapestry of fate. Take Brynhildr, perhaps the most famous Valkyrie, who defied Odin by sparing a king he'd marked for death. Punished with mortal imprisonment in a ring of fire, she becomes a tragic figure, half goddess, half pawn, her defiance proving even the choosers of the slain aren't free from their own tangled destinies. Her tale blurs the line between free will and predestination, asking, if the Valkyries shape fates, who shapes theirs? The duality of their role is staggering. In one breath, they're maternal figures, offering the fallen a goblet of mead in Valhalla. In the next, they're terrifying, their helmets casting elongated shadows across moonlit battlefields. Old English poems like The Dream of the Rude describe them as choosers of the eager, their voices humming with the same inevitability as the ravens Hugin and Munin, a thought and memory, who whisper the battlefield's secrets to Odin. This isn't just about reward, it's about legacy. To be chosen by a Valkyrie is to be immortalized in skaldic verse, your name etched into the world tree's bark. But what makes their lore endure isn't just the spectacle, it's the intimacy. Picture a dying warrior, his vision dimming, seeing not darkness but a Valkyrie's face looming above him. Her hand isn't cold, it's firm, lifting him from the muck of mortality to the glittering tables of the slain. This moment, repeated across countless battles, captures the Norse ideal that death isn't an end but a threshold, and the Valkyries are the ushers. Their existence reassured warriors that bravery wouldn't be swallowed by the void, it would be remembered. Modern echoes of the Valkyries ripple far beyond medieval texts. Wagner's operas clad them in horned helmets, historically inaccurate but iconic. Fantasy novels cast them as fierce heroines. Even neuroscience borrows their name for the Valkyrie molecule, a protein that decides which neural connections live or die. Their legacy isn't frozen in the past, it evolves because the questions they embody, who judges worth, can fate be cheated, are timeless. The next time you face a seemingly unwinnable struggle, ask yourself, not what the Valkyries would choose, but what they'd see in your defiance. That's their real gift, not the afterlife they offer, but the mirror they hold to the choices we make when the stakes are highest. Before the Spaniards brought their charts and telescopes to the Philippine archipelago, ancient Filipinos already had their own celestial mathematician storytellers who read the skies like palm lines, tracing the paths of gods and monsters in the constellations. Among these celestial dramas, none gripped the imagination like the Bacchanalwa, the moon-devouring dragon whose hunger turned day into night and sparked both terror and wonder in equal measure. This wasn't just a monster tale, it was an astronomical textbook disguised as myth. The Bacchanalwa, a colossal serpent with a mouth like a cavern and scales that shimmered like the night sea, was said to dwell in the depths of the ocean. But when the skies grew restless, when the full moon hung plump and bright over the islands, the creature would rise, its coils twisting through the clouds as it lunged for its celestial prey. To the naked eye, the moon would vanish bite by bite, swallowed whole until villagers, armed with nothing but rhythm and faith, clanged pots, beat drums, and shouted curses to startle the beast into coughing its prize back into the sky. The eclipse wasn't a shadow cast by orbiting bodies. It was a battle, a cosmic game of tug-of-war between humanity and the jaws of the unknown. What's fascinating isn't just the poetry of the myth, but the precision behind it. Pre-colonial astronomers, though they didn't call themselves that, had tracked lunar cycles for generations, noting the regularity of eclipses even if they cloaked the science in allegory. The Bacchanalwa's hunger struck predictably, timed to celestial patterns woven into oral tradition. Some versions of the tale even describe the dragon targeting 7 moons in the ancient sky, a possible nod to an older cosmology where multiple moons existed before the Bacchanalwa devoured all but one, our familiar silver companion. But the myth did more than explain eclipses. It prescribed action. Rituals to repel the Bacchanal weren't superstition. They were community cohesion, a way to unite villages under a shared purpose. When the moon darkened, no one cowered indoors. They participated, banging utensils, shaking bamboo clappers, turning fear into a collective performance. This was astronomy in motion, a reminder that the heavens weren't distant and indifferent, but intimately tied to human effort. The Bacchanal's defeat wasn't guaranteed by gods. It relied on the vigilance of fisherfolk, farmers, and children adding their voices to the cacophony. Modern science, of course, has demystified the mechanics of eclipses, yet the Bacchanal endures not as outdated ignorance, but as a testament to the human instinct to narrate the inexplicable. The dragon's hunger mirrors the awe we still feel when the moon winks out, the primal understanding that the universe operates on scales beyond our control. Today, Filipino astronomers host Bacchanal viewing parties, blending telescopes with traditional storytelling, proving that myth and science aren't rivals. They're two languages for the same wonder, two ways of saying, look up, the sky is alive, and perhaps that's the myth's deepest lesson. The Bacchanal wasn't just a monster, it was a teacher. Its cyclical attacks reinforced the importance of vigilance, of community, of reading nature's signs. When fishermen avoided voyages on nights the Bacchanal was predicted to strike, they weren't fearing fiction. They were heeding an early warning system veiled in scales and legend. The dragon didn't just swallow moons, it gave ancient Filipinos a reason to keep their eyes on the sky, to remember that even the most familiar lights could vanish in an instant, and that survival often depended on shouting back at the darkness together. In the scorching plains of ancient Sumer, where the Tigris and Euphrates carved life into the dust, a goddess made a choice that would unravel the very fabric of death itself. Inanna, queen of heaven and earth, fastened her 7 sacred me to her belt and set her face toward the underworld. This wasn't a whim or a reckless gamble. It was a calculated act of cosmic defiance, a deity walking knowingly into the mouth of the abyss to confront her sister Ereshkigal, queen of the dead. Every step downward mirrored the descent of grain into barren soil, the retreat of daylight into winter's grip, but also the unspoken truth that spring cannot exist without first surviving the dark. Inanna's preparation is as meticulous as it is symbolic. She adorns herself with 7 divine decrees, emblems of her power over love, war, and fertility, from the lapis lazuli measuring rod of kingship to the turquoise necklace whispering of sacred priestesses. Each me isn't just an ornament, it's a layer of her identity, an armor of meaning. But the gates of Ker, the underworld, care nothing for surface brilliance. At each of its 7 gates, the guardian Yeti strips one from her until she stands naked before Ereshkigal, stripped of titles and trappings. The moment is harrowing in its simplicity. Even gods must face the void without their masks. What happens next isn't just myth, it's an ancient mirror reflecting the rhythm of the natural world. Ereshkigal, far from a mere villain, is the necessary shadow to Inanna's radiance. She fastens the eye of death upon her sister, hanging her corpse on a hook like dried meat. The heavens wither in response, crops fail, animals cease to mate, and the songs of lovers fall silent. The universe itself stalls because life without death's counterpart is a wheel without an axle. Yet the story doesn't end in stasis. Through the cunning of Inanna's servant Ninchuba and the intervention of Inki, the god of wisdom, lifeless Inanna is resurrected, but with a catch. The underworld demands a replacement. The chilling resolution sees Inanna choosing her consort Dumuzi, the shepherd god, to spend half the year in the underworld while his sister takes his place in turn. Here, the myth blooms into its fullest meaning. Dumuzi's cyclical descent and return mirror the barley sown and harvested, the rains that come and go, the pulse of a world that thrives not in permanence, but in the tension between absence and renewal. What makes this 4,000-year-old epic revolutionary isn't just its narrative, but its layered psychology. Inanna isn't a passive victim, she's an architect of her own unmaking, seeking not to conquer death but to understand it. Her journey isn't linear, it's spiral like roots pushing downward to nourish new growth. Modern excavations of cuneiform tablets reveal variations where Inanna doesn't merely descend. She negotiates, sharing her wisdom with Ereshkigal in exchange for glimpses of the afterlife's mysteries. This nuance transforms the tale from a seasonal allegory into a meditation on reciprocity, showing that even divine power must bow to the balance of giving and taking. The legacy of Inanna's descent shimmers in unexpected places. The Mesopotamians saw her in the evening star's nightly disappearance below the horizon, in the pomegranates split open to reveal blood-red seeds. Today, scholars trace echoes of her in Persephone's tale and even resurrection myths halfway across the world. But perhaps its deepest lesson is this: rebirth isn't a return to what was. It's the alchemy of loss and adaptation, the understanding that to rise again, one must first surrender fully, terribly, to the dark. Off the storm-lashed coasts of Ireland and Scotland, where the sea froths like a ravenous beast against the cliffs, the Selkies slip between worlds with nothing more than a shiver of their skin. These aren't mere shape-shifters, they're creatures of aching duality, seals in the water, humans on land, their very existence a ballad of longing and loss. To see a Selkie shed its pelt is to witness magic stripped bare, the sleek, silvered hide sliding away to reveal a form as vulnerable as any mortal's, their eyes holding the deep, salt-heavy sadness of the ocean itself. At the heart of Selkie lore lies a paradox: freedom and captivity tangled like seaweed around a ship's anchor. The stories always begin the same way. A fisherman wandering the shore at twilight stumbles upon a pile of discarded pelts. When he takes one, hiding it in the thatch of his roof or beneath the floorboards, the Selkie who owns it has no choice but to follow, bound to the thief as surely as the tide is bound to the moon. She becomes his wife, bears his children, smiles with lips that taste of salt, but her gaze never stops straying to the horizon. The moment she rediscovers her hidden skin, she'll vanish into the waves without a backward glance, leaving only damp footprints and a heartbroken family behind. But here's what makes these tales so haunting: they're never framed as kidnappings. The fishermen aren't monsters, they're lonely men, their calloused hands trembling as they clutch the pelt, their motives a mix of love and desperation. The Selkies, in turn, aren't helpless victims. In some versions, they sing their human children lullabies in a language no mortal can understand, a secret melody carried on the wind long after they're gone. The Orkney Islands whisper of Selkie wives who leave gifts of fish during famines, their loyalty torn between two worlds. This isn't black and white morality, it's a tide pool of emotion, reflecting the complexities of love that cages as much as it cherishes. The Selkie's transformation is more than a magical party trick, it's a metaphor for the masks we all wear. On land, the Selkie walks as a human, laughing at village festivals, kneading bread by the fire. But beneath that borrowed skin thrums the wild, untamed pulse of the sea. Isn't that true of all of us, the parts of ourselves we shed to fit into roles: parent, partner, provider, only to feel that phantom pull toward something older, something freer? The Selkie's tragedy isn't just her captivity, it's the unbearable tension between belonging and authenticity. And then there are the Selkie men, often overlooked in the tales. They emerge from the waves not as docile spouses, but as tempests given human form, their love affairs burning bright and brief. Donegal legends speak of women who summon them by shedding 7 tears into the surf at high tide. These unions are passionate but doomed, for a Selkie man can no more resist the call of the ocean than a gull can refuse the wind. His departure leaves not bitterness but a bittersweet ache, the understanding that some loves are meant to be fleeting, as untamable as the tides. What lingers long after these stories end is the question they pose about consent and agency. The stolen pelt is more than a magical object, it's a violation, a rope around the soul. Modern retellings like the film The Secret of Ronin-ish grapple with this, showing Selkies not as prizes to be won, but as beings with their own sovereignty. Yet even in the oldest tales there's a quiet rebellion. A Cornish version tells of a Selkie wife who tricks her husband into revealing the pelt's hiding place by claiming she needs it to wipe the child's tears. Her triumph isn't vengeance, it's reclaiming her right to choose. Perhaps that's why Selkie myths endure. They're not just fairy tales, they're mirrors held up to our own restless hearts. The next time you stand by the sea, watching the seals bob in the waves, listen closely. Their barks might sound like laughter, or like a language just beyond your grasp, a reminder that beneath the surface of every ordinary life, there's something wild waiting to dive back into the deep. At the crossroads where the living world meets the realm of spirits, where dust swirls into phantom shapes and shadows whisper secrets, Papa Legba leans on his cane and smiles. In Haitian Vodou, he isn't just a loa, a spirit intermediary. He's the very hinge between realities, the one who parts the veil with a single creak of his rusted gate. Unlike the distant gods of other traditions, Legba is intimately accessible, a trickster sage who speaks all human languages, fluent in both the prayers of priests and the curses of thieves. His iconography is deceptively humble, an old man in a straw hat, sometimes accompanied by a dog, his pipe smoke curling into sigils only the initiated can read. But don't mistake his approachability for weakness. When petitioners come to the crossroads at twilight, leaving offerings of coffee spiked with rum or candies wrapped in red cloth, they're not just asking for his favor, they're negotiating passage to the entire Vodou pantheon. Without Legba's permission, no other loa can be reached. His power isn't in force but in access, the ultimate gatekeeper who decides which mortal pleas will echo in the ears of the divine. Yet the crossroads aren't just a physical space, they're a metaphor for life's turning points. A farmer seeking rain might leave a handful of corn at the intersection while whispering Legba's name, but so might a student before an exam or a lover waiting for a sign. This duality, the sacred and the mundane, is Vodou's beating heart. Rituals aren't locked away in temples, they unfold in backyards and alleyways where chickens are sacrificed beside laughing children and drummers sweat under the moon. Legba presides over it all, his laughter crackling like the sparks of a bonfire because he understands what many faiths forget. That spirituality isn't separate from daily survival. It's the knife edge between hunger and harvest, the split second before a choice that changes everything. Now, shift your gaze from the crossroads to the cemetery gates, where the air hums with the scent of rum poured over graves and cigar smoke curls into skull-shaped clouds. Here, Baron Samedi reigns, the loa of death who dresses like a dandy from a nightmare black tailcoat, polished skull face, and a top hat tipped at a jaunty angle. Where Legba is the opener of doors, Baron Samedi is the one who slams them shut, yet his dominion isn't about cruelty, it's about accountability. In Vodou cosmology, death isn't an end, it's a transition overseen by a spirit who's as likely to demand a shot of Claren as he is to pass judgment. His rituals are visceral. Devotees might chew bitter peppers to prove their resilience or dance until they collapse, embodying the Baron's chaotic energy. But beneath the macabre theatrics lies a profound truth. Baron Samedi doesn't just escort souls to the afterlife, he ensures they're remembered. During Fête Jid, Haiti's festival of the dead, crowds flood cemeteries dressed in purple and black, offering spicy food and raucous jokes to honor ancestors. The Baron's laughter, coarse and booming, is a reminder that confronting mortality doesn't require solemnity. It's a celebration, a defiance. When epidemics or political violence strike, it's the Baron's symbols that appear on walls and amulets, not as surrender to death, but as a challenge. We see you. We laugh anyway. The interplay between these two loa reveals Vodou's genius. Legba and Baron Samedi aren't opposites, they're collaborators in the cycle of existence. One greets you at the crossroads of your choices, the other meets you at the crossroads of your fate. Together, they weave a philosophy where power isn't begged from indifferent deities but bargained for with grit, humor, and unflinching honesty. To stand before them isn't to kneel, it's to converse, to dance, to demand your place in the story. And that's the real magic, not in the spirits themselves, but in what they reveal about the ones who call their names. Before time had a name, before gods walked the heavens or mortals tread the earth, there was only the formless, churning void, and its name was Tiamat. The Babylonians didn't imagine her as some gentle goddess or abstract force. She was the primordial ocean made flesh, a leviathan of salt and fury whose massive body stretched across the cosmos, scales glinting like distant galaxies, her roar the thunder of collapsing waves. To the ancient scribes who etched her story onto clay tablets, she wasn't just a monster, she was the embodiment of chaos itself, the unfathomable dark that existed before boundaries, before names, before order could even be dreamed of. Yet Tiamat's story isn't one of mere destruction. It's about the brutal, necessary act of creation through conflict. When the younger gods, born from her union with the freshwater god Apsu, grew too noisy, too restless, Tiamat's patience shattered. But she didn't just lash out, she transformed. Her body became an arsenal, venom dripped from her fangs, hurricanes gathered in her lungs, and she birthed an army of monstrous children. Horned serpents with bodies like battering rams, scorpion men whose venom could kill with a glance, and the first dragons, their wings wide enough to blot out the sun. This wasn't just a tantrum, it was chaos weaponizing itself, the untamed wild refusing to be tamed. Enter Marduk, the storm god, a deity so radiant his very steps lit the heavens. The other gods, trembling before Tiamat's tempest, begged him to confront her, but Marduk didn't act out of mere bravery, he negotiated. His price, absolute rule should he succeed. With their fate hanging in the balance, the gods agreed, and what followed was less a battle than a cosmic reckoning. Marduk harnessed the four winds like reins, rode a chariot of thunder, and faced Tiamat not with brute force alone but with strategy. He stuffed the winds into her gaping maw, inflating her until she couldn't bite, couldn't roar, then split her skull with a single, cataclysmic blow. Here's where the myth transcends violence. Tiamat's corpse didn't just vanish, it became the world. Marduk sliced her body like clay, molding the heavens from one half, the earth from the other. Her tears became the Tigris and Euphrates, her spine the mountains, her shattered teeth the stones. Even her monstrous children were tethered to the poles of the sky like celestial guard dogs, their chaos repurposed as protection. This isn't just a tale of conquest, it's a parable about the cost of order. The Babylonians understood that civilization doesn't rise peacefully. It's carved from the carcass of the wild, shaped by the hands of those willing to stare into the abyss and swing a hammer. But Tiamat's legacy lingers. Every flood that drowned Mesopotamian cities, every storm that tore through reed houses was a whisper of her enduring presence. The Babylonians didn't vilify her, they acknowledged her as the necessary antithesis to their walled gardens and ziggurats. Without her chaos, there could be no boundaries, no laws, no stories etched into tablets. She was the before that made after possible, the womb and the wreckage in one. Modern minds might dismiss this as just another creation myth, but look closer. Tiamat's story echoes in the Big Bang's explosive birth, in the way life emerged from violent cosmic collisions. Even our own bodies carry her paradox. Saltwater flows in our veins, remnants of some ancient ocean. She's a reminder that creation isn't tidy. Progress demands the dismantling of old orders, and every act of building leaves something broken behind. The next time you feel the world is too polished, too predictable, remember the dragon beneath it all. Her ribs the arches of your cities, her roar the wind in the wires, her chaos the hidden price of every clockwork sunrise. On the pale face of the moon, where shadows pool like spilled ink, a rabbit pounds its mortar and pestle with rhythmic devotion, not for grain or spice, but for the rarest treasure of all, the elixir of immortality. This is no ordinary creature, but the Korean moon rabbit, or doltoki, whose legend stretches back further than written history, woven into the very fabric of East Asian cosmology. Unlike Western myths that see the moon as a barren rock, Korean, Chinese, and Japanese traditions imagine it as a celestial pharmacy where the selfless labor of this small hair holds the secret to eternal life. The tale begins with a test from the heavens. The Jade Emperor, disguised as a starving old man, descends to Earth and begs three animals: a fox, a monkey, and a rabbit for food. The fox boasts as it delivers a stolen fish, the monkey plucks ripe fruit from the trees, but the rabbit, possessing nothing but its own body, throws itself into a fire as an offering. Touched by this pure sacrifice, the emperor grants the rabbit immortality, placing it on the moon as a beacon of selflessness. Yet the rabbit's work doesn't end there. It spends eternity grinding cinnamon and herbs under the lunar glow, a reminder that true virtue isn't a single act but a lifelong practice. This story isn't confined to folklore. During Chuseok, Korea's harvest festival, families make songpyeon rice cakes shaped like crescent moons and whisper that the rabbit's silhouette watches over their gratitude. In China's Mid-Autumn Festival, children are told the rabbit's mortar holds the ingredients for mooncakes, binding the celestial to the edible. Even Japan's Tsukumi celebrations feature rice dumplings arranged in pyramids, offerings to the lunar hare who embodies both sacrifice and abundance. The moon rabbit isn't just a character, it's a cultural shorthand for interconnectedness between earth and sky, generosity and reward, mortality and the divine. But there's a deeper alchemy here. The rabbit's elixir isn't just a potion, it's a metaphor for the moon's cyclical nature. Just as the creature endlessly pounds its mortar, the moon waxes and wanes, dying and reviving in an unbroken loop. In Taoist traditions, the rabbit's herbs symbolize the quest for harmony, ingredients that balance yin and yang, much like the moon itself balances night and day. Even the choice of cinnamon is telling. In ancient medicine, it was believed to warm the blood, a counterpoint to the moon's cool glow. The rabbit's labor, then, isn't just about eternal life, it's about sustaining the equilibrium of the cosmos itself. Modern astronomers might smile at the notion of a lunar pharmacist, but the myth persists in surprising ways. Korea's first lunar orbiter, launched in 2022, was named Danyori, a portmanteau meaning "enjoy the moon," while its rover, Korea Pathfinder Lunar Orbiter, earned the nickname Moon Rabbit. Science and legend don't clash here, they dance, proving that some stories don't fade with telescopes and data. They evolve, finding new homes in rockets and algorithms, whispering that curiosity and reverence can share the same sky. So the next time you glance at the full moon, squint a little. Beyond the craters and seas, you might spot the silhouette of a rabbit forever grinding its celestial medicine. It's not just a trick of the light, it's an invitation to ask what you'd sacrifice for something greater, and what you're willing to keep working for, even if the reward never comes. Beneath the Arctic's shifting ice floes, where the water's grip is colder than death itself, Sedna's fingers clutch the creatures of the deep, not with mercy, but with a wrath that chokes the currents. Her story doesn't begin as a goddess's rise to power, but as a tragedy carved by human treachery. Once a mortal woman, betrayed by her own father for the sake of survival, Sedna's transformation into the vengeful ruler of the sea is a tale of broken trust and the unforgiving alchemy of pain into dominion. It starts with hunger. When famine grips the land, Sedna's father promises her to a mysterious hunter, a stranger who seems to offer salvation. But the hunter is no man, he's a seabird spirit in disguise, and his nest on the cliffs is a prison of windswept rock and rotting fish. Desperate, Sedna's father paddles his kayak to rescue her, only to panic when the enraged bird spirit gives chase. As the waves thrash and the kayak threatens to capsize, he does the unthinkable. He hacks off Sedna's fingers as she clings to the boat's edge, her blood staining the ice. Her severed digits sink into the abyss, writhing into seals, walruses, and whales, the first marine life, birthed from her agony. Sedna herself follows, dragged into the depths where her rage hardens into something eternal. Now she rules Adlevan, the underwater realm where souls of the drowned and the wicked shiver in perpetual cold. The Inuit know her moods intimately. When hunters return empty-handed, when storms swallow kayaks whole, it's Sedna's tangled hair knotted with the sins of humanity that strangles the sea's bounty. Shamans must descend into trances, their spirits traveling to her realm to comb the snarls from her hair, soothing her fury with rituals and songs. Only then will she release the animals to be hunted again. This isn't just myth, it's ecology wrapped in morality. Sedna's storms enforce balance, punishing greed, demanding respect, reminding all who depend on the ocean that survival is a pact, not a right. Her duality is what haunts. Sedna is both mother and monster, the source of life and its withholding. A fisherman might praise her for a generous catch at dawn, then curse her caprice by noon when the ice cracks beneath him. Modern climate change adds a chilling layer as Arctic ice melts and traditional hunting wanes. Some elders whisper that Sedna's wrath has escalated, her storms more furious, her creatures scarcer. The myth isn't static, it breathes with the times, a cautionary tale for an era of environmental reckoning. What lingers isn't just the horror of her mutilation, but the lesson in her lore. Sedna doesn't hoard the sea's wealth out of spite, she demands accountability. Every knife that flences a seal, every hand that gathers mussels must remember the price of her gifts. Her story isn't about appeasing a distant goddess. It's about the intimacy of reciprocity, the understanding that the line between nourishment and destruction is as thin as the ice underfoot. To ignore Sedna isn't just sacrilege, it's starvation. And so the shamans keep combing, the hunters keep honoring, and the sea, in its frozen heart, keeps whispering her name. On the banks of the Tiber River, where the cries of infants should have been swallowed by the wilderness, history took a sharp turn because the wolf that found those twin boys didn't devour them. She nursed them. Romulus and Remus, cast into the currents by a usurper's fear, were saved by an animal Romans would later both revere and fear, their tiny fingers gripping the fur of a creature that should have been their end. This wasn't just survival, it was divine irony, a twist of fate that would forge an empire from the milk of a beast. The story begins with bloodlines and betrayal. Their mother, Sylvia, was a Vestal virgin sworn to celibacy, yet she bore the twins, claiming the god Mars as their father. Was this a lie to cover a mortal affair or a genuine divine encounter? The Romans didn't debate. For them, the ambiguity was the point. Their founding myth thrived in the liminal space between the miraculous and the mortal, between the wild and the civilized. The wolf, symbol of both savagery and nurture, embodied that tension perfectly. She didn't just feed the boys, she imprinted them with her duality. Romulus's later ruthlessness and Remus's untamed defiance both echoed in her growl. But the wolf was only the first chapter. Enter Faustulus, the shepherd who discovered the boys and raised them as his own. Here, the myth layers humility onto divinity. A god's sons raised by peasants, learning the land from the soil up. When the brothers grew old enough to learn their true heritage, they didn't just reclaim their birthright, they built their own destiny. And this is where the legend turns dark. The quarrel over where to found their city wasn't just a sibling spat, it was a clash of visions. Romulus favored the Palatine Hill, Remus the Aventine. They sought omens, and when Remus mocked Romulus's hastily built walls, the first king of Rome did the unthinkable. He killed his own brother. The founding act of the Eternal City wasn't a triumphant speech or a sacred ritual, it was fratricide, a stain that would shadow Rome's conscience for centuries. Yet Rome's myths didn't stop there. The abduction of the Sabine women, orchestrated by Romulus to populate his fledgling city, is another masterclass in mythic ambiguity. Was it a crime or a necessity? The stories tell of betrayal. The Sabines invited to a festival, their daughters seized, but also of reconciliation, as those very women later intervened to stop a war between their fathers and husbands. The message is uncomfortable but clear. Rome's greatness was born from brutality and compromise, from violence that somehow, improbably, knit disparate peoples together. What makes these tales endure isn't their moral simplicity, but their gritty realism. Unlike the flawless heroes of Greek epics, Romulus is deeply flawed, a leader who spills familial blood, who sanctions rape, yet whose city becomes the cradle of law and order. The Romans didn't whitewash their origins, they embraced the contradiction. The wolf's milk in their founding myth was a metaphor. Rome would always be part wild, part refined, a city that conquered through both legionary discipline and the primal will to survive. And perhaps that's why Romulus's end is as mysterious as his beginning. Whisked away in a storm, some said by Mars to join the gods, others whispered he was torn apart by senators tired of his tyranny. Even his disappearance is a Rorschach test: divine favor or political murder. The answer depends on who's telling the story, and that, in the end, is the real power of myth. It's not about truth, but about what a people choose to remember, to venerate, and to quietly fear in the dark corners of their history. When the wind howls across the Mongolian steppe, it doesn't just carry dust, it carries the voice of Tengri, the eternal blue sky, whose presence stretches unbroken from horizon to horizon, limitless as the grasslands themselves. This isn't just a weather phenomenon to the nomadic tribes who have worshipped him for millennia. It's the breath of a deity so vast he has no temples, because the entire cosmos is his sanctuary. Tengri's power isn't confined to myths or idols, it's etched into the daily rhythms of survival. The way a sudden storm can mean life or death for a herder's flock, the way the sun's glare on the open plains feels like a gaze from the heavens. His name translates simply to sky, yet his influence is anything but simple. He's the unseen hand guiding the migration of geese, the invisible force that hardens the ground beneath a galloping horse's hooves, the silent witness to every oath sworn under his expanse. What sets Tengri apart from other sky gods is his intimacy with the mundane. Unlike Zeus hurling thunderbolts from a distant Olympus, Tengri is woven into the fabric of everyday existence. A Mongolian herder doesn't pray to him in times of crisis alone. He acknowledges him in the act of tightening a saddle girth, in the careful selection of a campsite sheltered from the wind. The sky isn't just a symbol of the divine, it's a collaborator. When a shaman raises his drum to the clouds during a ceremony, he's not begging for intervention. He's aligning himself with a balance that already exists, tapping into a current of energy as real as the pulse in his wrists. Tengri's rule over fate is equally profound. The Mongols didn't see destiny as a fixed path, but as a negotiation between human will and celestial permission. When Genghis Khan united the tribes under the Great Blue Heavens, he wasn't just invoking a metaphor, he was declaring a partnership. The Khans claimed their authority came from Tengri's mandate, but this wasn't blind fatalism, it was a responsibility. A leader who failed his people would lose that divine favor as swiftly as a drought follows a careless spark. Even the legendary Silk Road traders, threading their way across the steppe, carried amulets inscribed with Tengri's name, not just for protection, but as reminders that every fortune gained or lost was part of a larger dialogue between earth and sky. Yet Tengri's spirituality is remarkably adaptable. As the Mongols encountered Buddhism, Islam, and Christianity during their empire's expansion, they didn't discard him, they layered new beliefs onto his foundation. In some traditions, he became a celestial Buddha, in others, a counterpart to Allah's majesty. This flexibility speaks to Tengri's core essence. He's less a being with human traits than a force of pure presence, a principle of connection that transcends form. Modern Mongolians still refer to the sky as Tenjer, a linguistic echo of the sacred, and athletes in Nodam festivals dedicate their wrestling victories to him, their arms raised not in triumph but in gratitude. The legacy of the eternal blue sky endures because it's rooted in a truth deeper than doctrine, the recognition that humans are small beneath the heavens, but not insignificant. Every time a herder scans the horizon for storm clouds or a child counts stars in the freezing go-by night, they're participating in a conversation older than written history. Tengri's power doesn't demand worship, it invites awareness, a reminder that the sky isn't just above us, it's within us, in the breath we share with the wind and the dreams we send upward like smoke from a nomad's fire. In the dimly lit alleys of 16th century Prague, where the shadows whispered of pogroms and persecution, Rabbi Judah Loew ben Bezalel knelt by the banks of the Vieltova River, gathering not water but mud-thick, wet clay that would become the heartbeat of a legend. This was no ordinary sculpture, it was a golem, a silent sentinel molded from earth and animated by the sacred secrets of the Kabbalah. The Jewish community faced relentless violence, and the rabbi's desperate act wasn't just about defense, it was a theological gamble, an attempt to harness divine power to shield the vulnerable. With rituals older than the ghetto itself, he carved the Hebrew word emet, truth, into the creature's forehead, infusing it with a semblance of life. The golem rose, a halting figure of clay and purpose, its eyes blank yet burning with obedient fury. But power, even divinely inspired, is never simple to control. By day, the golem patrolled the streets, its mere presence deterring mobs and intercepting whispered plots. It was said the creature could turn invisible, slipping through cracks like smoke, or grow to monstrous proportions, shaking the earth with each step. Yet by night, it returned to the synagogue attic, reverting to inert clay until the rabbi awoke it anew. This rhythm of activation and rest mirrored the Jewish understanding of creation itself, the balance between human ingenuity and divine will, between the impulse to act and the wisdom to pause. The legend takes a darker turn when the golem's strength outpaces its master's commands. Some versions speak of it developing a mind of its own, interpreting orders too literally, crushing not just threats but unintended targets. Others tell of it growing violent on the Sabbath when the rabbi, bound by sacred law, couldn't deactivate it. The creature meant to protect now stalked the very streets it once guarded, a monument to the peril of playing God. The turning point comes when Rabbi Loew scrambles to erase the first letter of emet, transforming it into met, death. The golem collapses, its clay body crumbling into the dust it once was, leaving behind only silence and a cautionary echo. What makes the golem myth so haunting isn't its supernatural spectacle, but its philosophical weight. Unlike Frankenstein's monster, born of hubris, the golem was born of necessity, a response to existential threat. Its downfall wasn't malice, but the inherent flaw in any power unchecked by nuance. The story asks uncomfortable questions. Can protection become oppression? When does a guardian become a jailer? Modern retellings, from literature to tech ethics debates, often frame the golem as a prototype for artificial intelligence, a force designed to serve yet capable of unintended havoc. The attic where the golems remain supposedly still rest has become a metaphor for humanity's unfinished business with its own creations. Yet Prague's golem also embodies resilience. In a world that repeatedly sought to erase Jewish voices, here was a story that refused to crumble. The creature's clay echoes the biblical Adam, shaped from the same humble earth, reminding us that defense and destruction are often molded from the same materials. The tale doesn't end with defeat, it ends with a choice, to lay down power when its cost outweighs its blessing. And perhaps that's the most enduring magic of all, the understanding that true strength isn't in the creating, but in the courage to unmake. Deep in the frozen forests of Algonquian lands, where winter's grip turns even breath to ice, there walks a horror born not of malice but necessity, the Wendigo. This isn't just another monster lurking in the dark, it's a cautionary tale etched into the bones of survival itself. Picture a hunter lost in the endless white, his stomach gnawing at his ribs like a starving beast. The blizzard howls, and with it a whisper, eat, but not the rabbits darting under the snow, no, the warmth of his own kin huddled beside the dying fire. That's the moment the curse takes root. The Wendigo isn't just a creature, it's the embodiment of the unthinkable choice between starvation and damnation, a warning as old as the first winter famine. The Wendigo's transformation is as psychological as it is physical. With every bite of human flesh, the afflicted don't just hunger, they expand. Their limbs stretch into grotesque skeletal frames, their skin tightens like parchment over ice, and their eyes hollow into black pits that reflect no light. The colder the world grows, the more the Wendigo burns with insatiable craving, a living paradox of frost and fever. Ojibwe and Cree elders speak of its voice, a sound like cracking ice, hissing promises of eternal fullness to those teetering on the edge of desperation. But the cruel twist, the more it consumes, the hungrier it becomes. The Wendigo isn't fed by its victims, it's starved by them, forever chasing a satiation that recedes like a mirage. Yet the true horror lies in the Wendigo's origins as a cultural safeguard. Before colonial distortions turned it into a generic boogeyman, the legend served as a sacred prohibition against cannibalism during harsh winters. In a world where survival often meant communal sacrifice, the Wendigo myth reinforced a brutal truth. Some lines once crossed unravel the soul. Taboos against hoarding food or abandoning the weak weren't just practical, they were spiritual. To eat another's flesh wasn't just murder, it was a rejection of humanity itself, a surrender to the icy indifference of nature. The Wendigo wasn't merely a punishment, it was the consequence, a walking reminder that morality doesn't melt in the face of hunger. Modern retellings often strip the Wendigo of this depth, reducing it to a zombie-like predator. But the original tales carry an eerie prescience. In an age of climate crises and resource scarcity, the Wendigo's curse feels less like folklore and more like prophecy. What happens when societies, like starving hunters, turn on their own in the name of survival? The Algonquian answer chills to the bone. You don't just lose your life. You lose your name, your face, your very right to be called human. The Wendigo doesn't just haunt the wilderness, it haunts the choices we'd rather not admit we're capable of making. And that's why, centuries later, its rasping breath still echoes in the wind, a whisper from the snow. Remember what happens when the cold wins. From the thunder-wielding gods of Olympus to the shape-shifting tricksters of indigenous folklore, these 35 tales aren't just relics of ancient imagination, they're mirrors. Mirrors reflecting humanity's deepest yearnings, our darkest fears, and the boundless creativity we've poured into explaining the unexplainable. Think about it, every story of divine strength, like Thor's hammer or the Monkey King's staff, whispers our own longing to break free from limitations. Every cautionary tale, from the Wendigo's hunger to the Golem's Chinese letter, warns of the fine line between power and peril. And every myth of creation, whether spun by Vishnu's avatars or Quetzalcoatl's blood, reveals our obsession with origins, the primal need to ask, where do we belong in this vast, spinning world? What's astonishing isn't just the variety, how Slavic villagers feared the Firebird's allure, while Polynesians cheered Maui's sun-slowing ropes but the threads that bind them. Cultures separated by oceans and millennia dreamed of flight, of immortality, of outwitting death itself. The Norse faced their doom at Ragnarök with grim acceptance. The hero twins of the Maya tricked the lords of Xibalba with cunning. Different answers to the same unshakable question. How do we navigate a universe that doesn't care if we survive? These stories also expose our contradictions. We crave both order and chaos, worshipping gods like Amaterasu who bring light yet spinning tales of Susanoo, whose storms carve new paths through destruction. We fear the unknown, Sedna's icy wrath, the Jinn's capricious bargains, yet we're drawn to it, sending shamans and heroes to negotiate with the abyss. Myths don't simplify life, they embrace its complexity, letting us wrestle with truths too slippery for textbooks. So here's the real magic. These legends aren't dead. They pulse in our modern world. When scientists name lunar rovers after moon rabbits or climate activists invoke Tiamat's balance, they're not just being poetic. They're tapping into a lineage of storytelling that turns fear into meaning, chaos into lesson. The next time you stare at a storm cloud or flinch at a shadow, remember, someone somewhere once spun a story to meet that moment. And now it's your turn. Which of these tales resonated with you? Was it Anansi's wit or Valkyrie's solemn duty? Drop your favorites in the comments. We're all part of this unbroken chain of wonder. And if you're hungry for more deep dives into history's mysteries, hit subscribe. The past isn't finished speaking, it's just waiting for the right listeners.